The wind carried smoke across the plains like whispers of the dead. Fires still smoldered in the charred ruins of Dustwaterer, once quiet frontier town, nestled between jagged red mesas and endless sky. Now it was little more than blackened timber, scorched earth, and silence. No birds, no cattle, no laughter, just the cackle of flames and the occasional groan of collapsing wood. At the edge of what was once the main street stood a lone figure, caked in ash, blood trailing down her cheek. Her name was Clara Voss, and everything she had known, her home, her family, her peace, had been taken from her in a single, brutal night. The outlaws had come with guns, torches, and cruelty. No warning, no mercy. They called themselves the Dagger Tongues, a band of drifters, bounty jumpers, and deserters who thrived on destruction. Led by the infamous Silas Creel, they swept through Dustwater like a sandstorm, shooting anyone who stood in their path and laughing while they watched the buildings burn. Clara had been out riding the East Trail when it began. She'd returned to smoke on the horizon, then galloped into a nightmare. Her boots hit the ground even before her horse stopped. Her lungs burned with smoke and grief as she stumbled through what was left of the town. She found her father, Marshall Ed Vauchat, in the street beside his badge. Her younger brother Toby, only 16, hung from the frame of the blacksmith's shop. Her best friend June, half buried in the rubble of the general store. She had not cried. Not then. She dug graves through the night with blistered hands and rage curling deep inside her ribs. She buried them quietly, with no priest and no prayer. She carved crosses from the charred wood of her father's old jailhouse and planted them in the dry, cracked earth. Then she stood over them, staring at the stars, until the sun rose on a hollowed-out woman. By morning, Clara Voss wasn't just a survivor, she was something else entirely. 3 days later, she rode south, not to mourn, not to run. To find them. She carried her father's six-shooter Colt .45 with notches on the grip end, a Winchester rifle wrapped in canvas. She wore the marshal's badge, not pinned on her coat, but tied around her neck with a leather cord. It swung lightly against her chest, a silent oath with every step. The road led her to a roadhouse called the Copper Fang, a rough wooden shack off the border trails where outlaws drank and rumors lived longer than people, the kind of place her father warned her never to enter. Inside, smoke hung thick in the air, and every pair of eyes turned when she walked through the door. Not many women walked in with a rifle on their back and death in their eyes. She didn't speak until she reached the bar. Then she said one name. Silas Creel, the bartender, a gaunt man with yellow teeth and old scars, froze halfway through polishing a glass. "I ain't heard that name in weeks," he muttered. "And if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Clara laid her father's badge on the counter, then set the Colt beside it. "You will now." The man swallowed. "Why you chasing him?" She leaned in close, voice flat as iron. "Because he burned Dustwater and killed everything I loved." A long silence stretched across the room. Then someone laughed. A drunk with a limp and a rusty knife at his belt snorted and said, "You, hunting Silas? Girl, he'll skin you alive." She turned and looked him in the eye. He stopped laughing when he saw her expression. The room quieted, and that was the first time they realized this woman wasn't here to bluff. She wasn't here to beg. She wasn't even angry anymore. She was cold, and focused, and past the point of fear. Clara Voss was hunting outlaws, and she was just getting started. The Copper Fang held more secrets than the rattlesnake's den outside Dustwater. But Clara had learned early that outlaws were careless, especially when drunk. She sat at the bar, nursing a watered-down whiskey, eyes scanning every face, every twitch of muscle, every whisper. Silas Creel's name floated through the roadhouse like a dark shadow no one wanted to mention, but Clara knew it was only a matter of time before she found someone who'd talk. It was a dirty game, and every lie was a trap, but she had one weapon that outlaws respected: her silence and the hard gleam of the marshal's badge hanging around her neck. After hours of empty threats and cold stares, a grizzled man named Hank Calloway slid onto the stool next to her. His face was weathered like old leather, eyes sharp but tired. "I hear you're hunting Silas Creel," he said, voice low. Clara nodded. "You know where he is?" Hank glanced around nervously, then pulled a crumpled piece of parchment from inside his coat. "Maybe. This here's a map of the border trails. Silas and his gang have been hiding out near the old Dead Man's Pass." She took the map, noting the jagged cliffs and winding paths drawn in dark ink. Dead Man's Pass was notorious, a narrow canyon where travelers vanished without a trace. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Hank's eyes flicked to the badge. Because he's killed more of my kin than you'll ever count. And because I don't want to see another girl left in ashes. Clara clenched her jaw. I'm going to bring him down. Hank grunted. Ain't no easy road, but if anyone can, it's you. As the night deepened, Clara pieced together what she could: Silas's routine, the gang's hideout, their weaknesses. Every detail was a thread she planned to pull until the whole gang unraveled. She paid Hank with a few coins and a nod, then stepped outside into the cold night. The sky was clear, the stars bright, but Clara felt nothing but a burning need for justice. She mounted her horse, eyes fixed on the path ahead. The road to Dead Man's Pass was treacherous and long. It would test every ounce of her skill and resolve. But Clara Voss was no longer a girl running from fire. She was a storm coming. The journey to Dead Man's Pass was grueling. The sun scorched the dusty trail by day, and the cold bit through her coat at night. Clara rode with the map clenched in one hand and her rifle slung across her back, every sense sharpened to the rugged wilderness around her. The land was as unforgiving as the men she hunted. Jagged rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth, and the wind carried the scent of sage and danger. Each step closer to the pass tightened the knot of tension in her chest. She remembered the last time she saw dustwater flames licking at the horizon, her father's gunshot echoing, her brother's scream swallowed by fire. The pain fueled her, but she kept it buried beneath a cold calm. Emotion would only slow her down. After 2 days of riding, the canyon loomed ahead, Dead Man's Pass, a narrow gorge cut deep into the cliffs, its walls high and shadowed. Travelers who entered were said never to return, swallowed by the darkness, or the outlaws who used it as a lair. Clara dismounted at the edge of the pass, tying her horse to a weathered tree. She stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning for signs: broken branches, footprints, the faint glow of a campfire. She spotted fresh tracks leading deeper into the canyon. The hoofprints were uneven, and she could see footprints mixed with them, signs of a hastily broken camp. Her pulse quickened. The dagger tongues were close. She moved quietly, the crunch of gravel underfoot almost deafening in the stillness. Suddenly, a sharp whistle echoed through the canyon. Clara froze, heart pounding. From behind a large boulder, 2 men stepped out, grinning, but caught off guard by the lone woman standing firm. Lost, little lady, one sneered. Clara leveled her rifle at them. Tell Silas Creel I'm coming for him. The men exchanged nervous glances but didn't lower their weapons. The larger one stepped forward. You don't know what you're walking into. I know exactly what I'm walking into. Before either man could react, Clara fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack echoed, startling birds from the cliffs. Go back to your gang, she said coldly. Or stay and die. For a tense moment, the 2 outlaws hesitated. Then, with curses, they fled back into the shadows. Clara exhaled, then pressed on. The pass narrowed as she walked, the walls rising high and close, blocking the sun. She could hear voices up ahead, rough, loud, laughing. She crept toward a clearing, and spotted the camp: a scattering of tents and a fire burning low. Around it sat a dozen men, some tending to wounds, others cleaning weapons, and at the center, the unmistakable figure of Silas Creel, tall, with cold eyes like chipped obsidian and a cruel smile that didn't reach his face. Clara's hand tightened on her rifle. She had found him, but she knew this was only the beginning. Clara crouched behind a boulder, her breath steady, eyes locked on Silas Creel's camp. The firelight flickered over hardened faces, rifles leaning against tents, and whiskey bottles passed around like trophies. This was no ordinary outlaw hideout, was a fortress of cruelty and lawlessness. Her mind raced. Charging and guns blazing meant death, or worse, capture and torture. She needed a plan, something smart, something precise. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of her rifle and then her Colt. The 2 weapons were extensions of her will. Silent, deadly, she pulled the map from inside her coat and traced a route around the camp. There was a narrow ridge above the pass, a vantage point where she could watch and wait. Patience was a weapon, too. Over the next 2 days, Clara observed the outlaws. She learned their shifts, their weaknesses, who was too drunk to shoot straight, and which men had families they feared losing. She saw Silas in action, ruthless, commanding, but also calculating. She realized something chilling. Silas wasn't just a brute. He was a man who thrived on control and fear, and that made him dangerous. One night, under a moonless sky, Clara slipped into the camp's shadows and stole a satchel filled with letters and ledgers. Among the papers were clues, payments, bribes, and a name she recognized, Mayor Kane of Dustwater. Her stomach twisted. The mayor had been involved, maybe even complicit in the town's destruction. The betrayal cut deeper than the fire. Clara returned to her ridge and stared at the stars. The weight of vengeance pressing down on her, she was no longer just fighting for revenge, she was fighting for justice. The revelation hit Clara like a bullet. Mayor Kane, the man she once trusted to protect Dustwater, was tangled with Silas Creel. The letters in her hand revealed a twisted alliance, payments made to ensure the outlaws could roam free. A silent pact sealed with greed and fear. Clara's jaw clenched. She had buried her family once. But she wouldn't let corruption rot her home from the inside out. That night, she rode back toward the ruins of Dustwater, the weight of the evidence heavy in her saddlebag. The town was ghostly quiet under the moonlight. But Clara's eyes caught movement near the old saloon. A figure slipped through the shadows, a man, cloaked in a long coat. Her heart tightened. It was Deputy Harris, Mayor Kane's right-hand man. Known for his cruelty masked behind a badge. She followed him silently to the mayor's office, where voices leaked through the cracked door. "Silas won't hold forever," Mayor Kane hissed. "We need the town under control before the territory's here." Deputy Harris laughed darkly. "Let her come. She'll only bring trouble." Clara's fingers curled into fists. She needed allies, not just vengeance. The next morning, she sought out June Parker, the surviving blacksmith's daughter, and a few others who had escaped the outlaws' wrath. Together, they formed a quiet resistance, determined to reclaim their home. The battle ahead was no longer just against outlaws, but against betrayal in the shadows. The sun crept over the horizon, casting a pale light on the shattered remains of Dustwater. But beneath the ruins, something stirred, a spark of hope. Fueled by determination and righteous fury, Clara gathered the small band of survivors. June Parker, a fierce woman skilled with a hammer and fire. Tom Miller, a sharpshooter with a grudge. And old Hank Calloway, the grizzled man who first gave Clara the map. Together, they began to rebuild not just buildings, but their strength and will to fight. They scavenged weapons, laid traps along the trails, and spread word quietly to neighboring towns. The dagger tongues had underestimated one thing: the heart of a woman with nothing left to lose. Clara trained tirelessly, pushing herself beyond pain, beyond fear. Each scar was a reminder, each hard-earned breath a promise. The memory of her family's faces, her father's steady gaze. Toby's laughter fueled every step. Word came that Silas planned a raid to finish what he started. The survivors steeled themselves for the coming storm. On a cold night, as the outlaws crept back toward Dustwater, Clara and her band were waiting. The battle was brutal. Gunfire shattered the quiet, horses screamed, and dust clouded the air. But Clara fought like a tempest, swift, unyielding, relentless. When the smoke cleared, Silas Creel lay wounded, his gang broken. The once feared outlaw was forced to crawl and beg. Clara stood over him, bloodied but unbroken. "Dustwater rises," she said, voice steady as steel. "And will never bow to terror again." Silas Creel lay on the dusty ground, his face twisted in pain and disbelief. The gang that once ruled the border trails was shattered. Their leader broken and begging for mercy before Clara Voss, the woman they thought would be crushed beneath their boots. Clara looked down at him, the weight of every loss, every tear, every burnt building pressing heavy on her chest. Yet, in that moment, she felt no triumph, only a cold, steady resolve. "You had your chance," she said quietly. "You chose fire and death over peace and law. Now, you answer for it." The survivors gathered, June, Tom, Hank watching silently as Clara pulled Silas to his feet. Together, they marched back toward Dustwater. Toward the town's ruined center, the townsfolk, those who remained and those who had heard the tale, came out to see the reckoning. Mayor Kane, the man whose greed fueled the chaos, was nowhere to be found. But his betrayal had not gone unnoticed. Clara handed Silas over to the newly appointed sheriff, a man, honest and true, ready to rebuild Dustwater alongside its people. The outlaws would be tried, the corrupt exposed, and the town would heal slowly but surely. As Clara stood among the ashes of her home, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. Dustwater was scarred, but alive. And so was she.